It was supposed to be the happiest time of the year, Christmas. But when I called my son Daniel to ask what time I should come over, he sighed and said, "Dad, we already have enough people this year. It's going to be crowded. Maybe you can join us next time." His words hit harder than I expected. I laughed awkwardly, pretending it didn't sting, and said, "Sure, son, I understand." But deep down, my heart cracked. Ever since his wife Caroline came into the picture, things had changed. They had a big new house, fancy cars, and her wealthy family visited often. I always felt out of place, like I wasn't good enough for their kind of Christmas. That night, I sat alone in my small living room, looking at the flickering lights on my old tree. I remembered how I used to work double shifts to make sure Daniel had gifts under the tree every year. I paid for his college, his first car, even the down payment on that beautiful house he now shared with his enough people. I checked my mailbox the next morning, another reminder from the bank about their mortgage payment. You see, I was still paying it off for them. They didn't know that I had kept helping quietly, making sure they never missed a payment. But that day, something inside me shifted. I called the bank and canceled the next payment. It was time for my son to stand on his own feet. The night of their Christmas dinner, I drove by their house. Through the window, I saw laughter, lights, and everyone raising their glasses. My seat was empty, but I didn't feel small anymore. I had an envelope in my coat pocket, a single paper from the bank. It said, "Mortgage Default Notice." I smiled bitterly. "Merry Christmas, son," I whispered. Then I walked up to their porch, knocked once, and waited. Daniel opened the door with surprise written all over his face. His fancy sweater and the sound of Christmas laughter behind him made it clear I had interrupted something. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked, lowering his voice as if embarrassed someone might see me. I smiled calmly, holding out the envelope. "Merry Christmas, son. I just came to drop this off." He didn't even invite me in. He sighed, glanced back into the dining room where Caroline's family sat around a glittering table, and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Dad, I told you it's not a good time," he said sharply. "We're in the middle of dinner." "I won't take your time," I replied. "This is just something important from the bank. Take it." I handed him the envelope, watching his brow furrow as he tore it open. As his eyes scanned the paper, his confident face drained of color. "What is this?" he demanded. "It says our mortgage payment was missed. We're supposed to be covered. How's that possible?" I met his gaze quietly. "Because I canceled it." He froze. "You canceled it? Why would you— Dad, what are you talking about?" His voice rose and Caroline stepped out to see what was going on. "Daniel, what's happening?" she asked, her pearl earrings catching the warm light. He handed her the paper. Her eyes darted across the lines and her jaw dropped. "Wait, you mean your father was paying your mortgage all this time?" Daniel turned red. "I was going to pay him back," he mumbled. I let out the soft chuckle. "You didn't even know I was paying, son." Caroline's father came out then, tall and cold, his tone dripping with disapproval. "So, the house wasn't truly yours after all," he said. "Interesting." The silence that followed was heavy. Caroline looked mortified. Daniel clenched his fists. "Dad, you didn't have to do this. Coming here like this, making a scene." I cut him off gently. "I didn't come to make a scene. I came to remind you of something. You told me there were enough people for Christmas, but maybe the one who helped you build this life was one of those people you forgot to count." Daniel looked like he wanted to say something, but his pride wouldn't let him. His rich in-laws watched quietly, their judgment filling the air. "You made your choices, son. From now on, you handle your own bills, your own home, your own responsibilities. I'm done being the silent helper." I turned to leave, but then I heard Caroline's father say, "Maybe it's time we reconsider our business arrangement, Daniel. A man who hides debts isn't trustworthy. I stopped for a moment, eyes closed, and took a breath. That single line was enough. My son's world began to shake from the truth he'd hidden. Behind me, Daniel's voice broke. "Dad, wait!" But I didn't turn around. I walked down the snowy path, the lights from their house glowing behind me. My heart ached, but it was free for the first time in years. I reached my truck, sat behind the wheel, and let the tears fall. I whispered to myself, sometimes the best gift you can give your child is the lesson of standing alone. As I drove away, I saw movement in my rearview mirror. Daniel, running barefoot in the snow, calling after me. I stopped the truck. He reached my window, breathless. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said, eyes wet. "I didn't know." I looked at him, my heart heavy, but proud. I said, "You didn't want to know, but maybe now you will." He nodded slowly, defeated. "Please, come back inside. Have dinner with us." I smiled faintly. "I appreciate that, son, but this year, I think I'll have dinner with someone who never forgets to count me. Myself." I drove off into the falling snow, leaving him standing there. In the distance, I could still hear the faint echo of carols from his house, but for once, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole again.
A year passed after that cold Christmas night. I hadn't heard much from Daniel since then, just a few short calls here and there. He sounded distant, awkward, maybe ashamed. I didn't push him. I figured life had finally handed him the lesson I'd been too gentle to teach. I kept busy fixing things around my small cabin and volunteering at the local shelter during weekends. Christmas was approaching again, and the town was lighting up with decorations. Every store window sparkled with wreaths and snowflakes. But this time, I wasn't sad. I'd learned how peaceful it could be when you stop waiting for invitations that never come. 3 days before Christmas, I got an envelope in the mail. It was plain white, no return address. Inside, there was a handwritten note. "Dad, dinner starts at 7. Please come early. I've got something for you." My heart paused for a beat. The handwriting was Daniel's. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity, and maybe hope, got the better of me. On Christmas Eve, I wore my old brown jacket and drove to Daniel's neighborhood. I hadn't been there since that night. The moment I parked, I noticed something different. The house wasn't glowing with extravagant lights like last year. It looked simpler, humbler. I rang the doorbell. The door opened, and there stood Daniel, not in a fancy sweater, but a plain flannel shirt. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm glad you came." Behind him, the house was filled with warmth. The table was modestly set, and I saw Caroline carrying a tray of food, not store-bought catering, but homemade dishes. Her father wasn't there, neither was her rich family. Instead, there were a few neighbors, some kids, and a woman from the local church. Daniel noticed my surprise. "Yeah," he smiled awkwardly, "things have changed a bit this year." We sat down at the table. For a moment, it was quiet. Then Daniel raised his glass. "Everyone, before we eat, I want to say something." He stood, voice trembling. "Last year, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I shut my father out because I was embarrassed. Embarrassed of my roots, of where I came from, of the man who gave me everything. I thought money made me better. I was wrong." The room went silent. My chest tightened as I looked at him. "Dad," he continued, "when you canceled the mortgage payment, it all came crashing down. Caroline's family left, I lost my job, our car, even this house almost slipped away. But that's when I finally realized everything I ever had came from you. And this Christmas, I want to give something back." He handed me a small red box. I opened it and found a single key inside. "What's this?" I asked, confused. He smiled. "It's the deed to this house. I sold my car, worked double shifts, and paid back every cent I owed you. This house is now in your name. I figured, you built it for us once. It's only fair you should own it now. My throat tightened. I could barely speak. Daniel, you don't have to— No, Dad, he interrupted gently. I need to. Because family isn't about who has enough people. It's about who stood by you when everyone else left. For the first time in years, tears streamed down my face without shame. Caroline came and placed her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, too, she said softly. I was proud, and I pushed him away from you. I won't let that happen again. That night, we all sat down to dinner. No fancy silverware, no rich guests, just warmth, laughter, and forgiveness. I looked around the table, and this time I wasn't an outsider. I was home. When the clock struck midnight, Daniel raised his glass again. To Dad, he said, smiling through tears, the man who taught me what Christmas really means. We clinked glasses, and I whispered, Merry Christmas, son.
Snow was falling gently outside the window, the soft hum of Christmas carols filling Daniel's living room. Laughter drifted from the kitchen as Caroline and a few neighbors shared stories over hot cocoa. It felt like the warmth had finally come back into that house, the kind of warmth that money could never buy. I sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance. Daniel came over, 2 mugs in his hands, and handed me one. Hot chocolate, Dad, just how you used to make it for me when I was little. I smiled, taking a sip. You remembered. He sat beside me, staring into the fire. I remember everything now, he said quietly. I remember you coming home late from work, still finding time to help me with my homework. I remember Mom crying when the bills piled up, and you telling her not to worry. You carried all of us. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence says enough. Then Daniel took a deep breath and said, After last Christmas, when we lost almost everything, I thought I'd never recover. But that's when I realized losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. It made me find what really mattered. I turned to him. And what's that? He smiled faintly. You. My chest tightened. I placed a hand on his shoulder, not trusting my voice. For years, I had prayed that my son would see me not as a burden, but as a father again. And finally, he did. Just then, little footsteps came running into the room. It was Daniel's daughter, my granddaughter, Lily. She wore tiny reindeer pajamas and held a small box wrapped in golden paper. Grandpa, she said excitedly, Daddy said this one's from me. I laughed, taking the box. From you? Well, that makes it special already. Inside was a hand-painted ornament, clumsy but adorable. A little wooden heart that said, Grandpa's Christmas. I couldn't hold back the tears. Thank you, sweetheart, I whispered, hugging her tight. Daniel smiled quietly, watching us. She knows who made Christmas special this year, he said softly. It wasn't the lights or the gifts. It was you. That night, as everyone gathered around the table, we didn't talk about the past. We just enjoyed being together, finally, as a family again. But deep in my heart, I knew something Daniel didn't. I hadn't been feeling well for months. The doctor had warned me my heart wasn't as strong as it used to be. That's why, when I got his letter inviting me this year, I promised myself one thing. If this was my last Christmas, I wanted it to be spent here, with my son, where I belonged. After dinner, when everyone was asleep, I quietly took out a notebook from my coat pocket. I wrote for hours, page after page, memories, lessons, apologies, and a few secrets I'd never told anyone. When I finished, I placed the notebook inside a wooden box and hid it behind a loose floorboard under the fireplace, the place Daniel used to hide his toys as a kid. I smiled to myself and whispered, You'll find it when the time is right. Then I turned off the light
and sat by the window and watched the snow fall until I drifted off to sleep, the faint sound of laughter echoing from the next room.
It was early spring when the call came. Daniel was at work, buried under paperwork, when his phone buzzed. The number belonged to a neighbor from his father's town. He answered casually, not expecting much, until he heard the trembling voice on the other end. "Daniel, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your father passed away peacefully in his sleep last night." For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. The office around him went silent. The words echoed again and again. Passed away peacefully. He dropped the phone, his vision blurring. The man he had once pushed away, the man who had quietly carried him for years, was gone. He drove for hours through the rain to reach the small cabin. Everything was just as his father had left it. The old clock ticking, the faint smell of coffee, the worn coat hanging by the door. On the table sat a cup of cold tea, half finished, and a single photo frame. Daniel, his wife, and little Lily smiling from last Christmas. Daniel broke down. He sank into the old armchair, his head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. I was too late. I wanted more time. Later that evening, as he went through the drawers, sorting his father's things, he found something unusual. A folded note with his name written on it. "Daniel, look under the fireplace floorboard." His heart pounded. He rushed to the living room, dropped to his knees, and pried open the loose plank. Inside was a small wooden box. His father's handwriting covered the lid. "When you're ready to understand." Daniel opened it slowly. Inside was the old notebook, the same one his father used to jot down bills and memories. The first page began simply. "My son, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I left my truth." Daniel turned the pages, his hands shaking. His father had written everything: the sacrifices, the loneliness, the reasons he kept paying for the mortgage. Then, near the end, the words grew softer. "I knew my heart wouldn't last long. That's why last Christmas meant everything to me. I saw you become the man I always knew you could be. But there's one more thing I never told you. The money I used for your house wasn't from savings. It came from selling the land your grandfather left me. The same land you loved as a boy. I kept one last piece of it, 5 acres by the river. It's still in your name. I wanted you to build something of your own there, something for Lily to remember us by." Tears dripped onto the pages. Daniel turned to the final entry, dated just 2 days before his father's death. "If you ever doubt yourself, look to the river. That's where you and I belong, where things flow but never truly disappear." Daniel closed the book, holding it to his chest. For the first time since his father's passing, he didn't feel loss. He felt presence. The next morning, he drove out to the river. The sun was rising, golden light spilling over the water. He could almost hear his father's voice in the wind. "Stand tall, son. You did good." Daniel took a deep breath, smiling through tears. "I love you, Dad. I'll make you proud." Months later, he started building a small lakeside retreat on that land. A quiet place for families without homes to stay during the holidays. He named it George's Haven, after his father. Every Christmas since then, Daniel and Lily decorate the cabin with the same wooden heart ornament that said, "Grandpa's Christmas." And every time the snow begins to fall, Daniel lights a candle by the window and whispers, "You're still counted, Dad. Always." Years rolled by like pages in a quiet book,
Seasons changed. The river by George's Haven flowed endlessly, and life slowly found its rhythm again. Daniel grew older, his hair turning gray around the edges, but the same gentle strength that once belonged to his father now lived in him. George's Haven had become something beautiful, a refuge for families who had lost everything. Every Christmas, people from nearby towns came to the cabin, shared stories, meals, and memories. No one was ever turned away. And at the center of it all stood the old wooden heart ornament, Grandpa's Christmas. Lily, now 16, loved that place more than anything. She helped decorate, cook, and read bedtime stories to the children who stayed there. Every time she looked at her father working by the firelight, she felt proud but also curious. "Dad," she asked one evening, "do you ever miss Grandpa?" Daniel smiled softly, eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. "Every single day," he said. "But I don't feel like he's gone. This place, it's him. Every brick, every laugh, every kindness, it's all a part of your Grandpa George." Lily nodded quietly. "I wish I had known him more." Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the old notebook, the one his father had left behind. Its cover was worn, its pages yellowed, but his handwriting still clear. He handed it to her. "Then you can know him in his own words." Lily opened it, her eyes scanning the faded ink. She read the part about how George worked day and night for Daniel, about how he quietly carried the family's burden, and how he forgave his son after being forgotten. By the time she reached the final entry, "If you ever doubt yourself, look to the river," her eyes were wet. She looked up and whispered, "He sounds like the kindest man who ever lived." Daniel smiled. "He was, and I almost lost him before I realized it." Later that night, Lily couldn't sleep. She slipped outside wrapped in a blanket and sat by the river. The moonlight shimmered across the water. She whispered, "Hi, Grandpa. I think I finally understand you. You didn't need thanks. You just wanted to love." A gentle wind rustled through the trees. It was as if the river itself answered her. She smiled and stayed there until dawn. The following morning, she had an idea. "Dad," she said excitedly, "what if we expand George's Haven, not just for Christmas, but all year round? A place where people can come when they have nowhere else to go. A school, a kitchen, maybe even a garden by the river." Daniel looked at her, stunned for a moment, then laughed. "You sound just like your grandfather." "Then maybe I'm supposed to," she said, grinning. Together they began drawing plans, Lily's sketches filling the kitchen table, the same table where George once sat. Months turned into a year, and George's Haven grew. Volunteers came, donations arrived, and the place blossomed into something extraordinary. The riverbank was lined with flowers, the cabins painted warm colors, and at the entrance hung a new wooden sign carved by Lily herself. "George's Haven, where no one is forgotten." Every visitor touched that sign as they entered, some with tears in their eyes, some whispering prayers. Inside, the first thing they always saw was the old heart ornament, still hanging by the window. One cold December night, a snowstorm knocked out the power across town, but inside, George's Haven, candles glowed everywhere. Families sang carols by the fire, while Daniel and Lily handed out blankets and cocoa. The place felt alive, like love itself had taken form in those walls. As Daniel watched his daughter laughing with the children, he felt something shift in the air. A presence, soft but certain. The fire flickered, and for a brief second, he thought he saw a familiar figure sitting in the old armchair near the window. His father, smiling, his eyes filled with pride. He blinked, and the chair was empty again, but his heart was full. He whispered under his breath, I see you, Dad. Merry Christmas.
Years passed like gentle tides against the riverbank. George's Haven had grown far beyond what anyone imagined. It wasn't just a refuge anymore. It had become a living symbol of love, resilience, and second chances. There were now 3 cabins, a community garden, and a little classroom by the hill where Lily taught kids whose parents were struggling to rebuild their lives. The laughter of children mixed with the rustling of trees. The place felt sacred, alive with stories of hope. Daniel, now gray-haired and slow in his steps, spent most mornings sitting by the river with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. The river never stopped flowing, just like the memory of his father. Lily would often join him, sketchbook in hand, capturing the view on paper. "You still come here every morning, huh?" she teased. Daniel smiled faintly. "Old habits die hard, sweetheart. Your grandpa and I both loved this river. It listens when no one else does." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "You think he's proud of us?" Daniel looked out at the water glistening under the morning sun. "I don't think," he said softly. "I know he is." That afternoon, visitors arrived. Families, neighbors, even local journalists. They were there for the annual Haven Christmas Gathering, a tradition Daniel started years ago in honor of his father. There was singing, storytelling, laughter, and food cooked from the heart. Daniel stood by the fireplace and spoke, his voice deep and warm. "My father, George, taught me what Christmas really means. It's not about what you have. It's about who you hold close. And if any of you here ever feel forgotten, just remember, you're already part of our family." Applause filled the room, and Daniel smiled proudly, his eyes shining with tears. As night fell, snow began to drift outside, the same gentle flakes that once fell on that lonely Christmas years ago. After everyone left, Daniel and Lily stayed up late, talking by the fire. "Dad," Lily said softly, "when you're gone someday, I'll keep this place alive. I promise." Daniel chuckled quietly. "I'm not planning to go anywhere just yet, Lily." She smiled, though something in her heart felt different that night. An ache she couldn't explain. The fire burned low. Daniel looked tired, his voice faint, but peaceful. "If I ever do go, just look to the river, like Grandpa said. You'll find us both there." Lily hugged him tight. "I'll never forget." "You won't have to," he whispered, "because love, real love, never dies." That night, after she went to bed, Daniel sat alone by the fireplace, holding his father's notebook. He turned to the last blank page and began to write. "Lily, my little miracle. If you're reading this, it means I've joined your grandpa. But don't cry. I had the life I dreamed of because of you. You reminded me that kindness lasts longer than memory. This place, this haven, is now yours. Keep its doors open, always. And when the snow falls by the river, listen closely. You'll hear us laughing." He closed the book gently, placed it in the same wooden box his father once used, and slid it under the floorboard, beneath the same spot by the fire. Then he whispered, "Good night, Dad. See you soon." The next morning, Lily found him asleep in his chair, peaceful, smiling, the fire still warm beside him. Years rolled by like pages in a book. The cabins of George's Haven now stood stronger than ever, painted in soft tones of green and gold. Children still played in the garden, laughter echoing through the pines. But now, at the heart of it all stood Lily, no longer the little girl sketching by the river, but a woman whose calm eyes carried the reflection of 2 men she'd loved and lost, her father Daniel and her grandfather George. One winter morning, as snowflakes danced silently through the air, Lily unlocked the old cabin, the first one her father had built.
Dust floated in the golden light as she swept her hand across the wooden floor. Something creaked beneath her touch. Curious, she knelt down and lifted a loose plank. There, wrapped in a faded scarf, was the small wooden box. Her breath caught. She opened it carefully. Inside lay the notebook her father once carried, the one filled with George's handwriting, and now Daniel's. Her fingers trembled as she turned the pages, each word a heartbeat from the past. When she reached the final message, written in Daniel's familiar, steady hand, tears welled up. "Lily, my little miracle." She read it slowly, every line painting memories in her mind. Of the fireplace, of laughter, of the promise she'd once made. When she finished, she pressed the notebook to her chest and whispered, "I kept it alive, Dad, just like you asked." That evening, the villagers gathered for the Christmas celebration. The hall was decorated with handmade stars, pine branches, and candles that flickered softly. Lily stood before everyone, just like her father used to, the warmth of the fire behind her. "This haven was built by my grandfather, rebuilt by my father, and kept alive by all of you. It isn't just a place, it's a reminder that love can survive anything. Tonight, we honor them, not with sorrow, but with gratitude, because they taught us that even when people leave, love stays." The crowd clapped, some wiping away tears. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the haven in quiet peace. After the guests left, Lily stepped out alone toward the river. The moonlight shimmered on the frozen water. She sat by the bank, the same spot her father loved, and whispered into the cold night air, "Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, Grandpa." And just then, as the wind brushed past her, she heard it. A faint, familiar laugh. Two of them. Soft, gentle, like the river remembering every promise ever made. She smiled through her tears, closing her eyes. The river flowed on, carrying their voices with it, forever.